Just let me know when you're ready.
Yeah, I'm going to try and give it just 1 or 2 more minutes.
Yes, we're missing a couple counselors there.
Hey, Matt, I did tell you that I took I went to take a COVID test and they asked me if I'd lost my my sense of taste.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I always dress this way.
Oh, Bill, you crack me up. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Claire, I think you're muted if you're trying to talk to us. No?
No, I'm yelling at kids in other room.
We do have 7 people here out of the 10, so we do have a quorum. So Garrett, if you want to go ahead and get started, you're welcome to open the meeting.
Okay, since we've got a quorum, I'm dark because I don't have the bandwidth to have my picture and my voice. So consequently, we'll call a meeting of the 2021-22 Budget Committee to order.
Thank you, Garrett. So I am okay skipping introductions. It sounds, I think everybody knows each other. We have Michelle. She's fairly new, and actually it'd probably be good to do introductions for her.
Yes.
So Mayor, if you want to start and then just hand it off to whatever counselor you'd like to.
Sure. Mayor Scholl. Councilor Chilton, I guess.
I am Jessica Chilton, Councilor Chilton. Patrick.
Hi, Patrick Berkeley, council member and once upon a time member of the Budget Committee years ago.
Garrett, did you want to start?
Okay, you're talking about being an introduction?
Yeah, just doing introductions.
Okay, I will put this on for a minute. Hi, I'm Garrett Lyons. I've been on the Budget Committee for a few years now. Who else do you want to go to?
Let's go to Bill.
I'm Bill Eagle. I'm on the Budget Committee.
And Claire?
Good evening, Claire Cat. This is my second cycle of Budget Committee.
And Michelle?
I'm Michelle Damas, just over a year here in St. Helens. This is my first time on the Budget Committee, and I was on the Ad Hoc Justice Center Committee too.
And Mark? You are muted, Mark. There you go.
Their first year on the Budget Committee. So yeah, got to learn the ropes.
Okay. So I am Matt Brown. I'm the Assistant City Administrator and the Budget Officer for this year. And John?
And I'm John Walsh, the City Administrator, and welcome Mark and Michelle. And Michelle was at the main St. Helens Main Street meeting the other day, and I got to know her a little bit there, so look forward to that.
All right. So I'm going to share my screen here. Should be able to see the presentation that is tonight. Do not be afraid to just speak up and interrupt me. I will try and keep an eye on the participants list if you want to try and raise your hand. So please don't hesitate to interrupt with questions or anything as we kind of go through the process. So everyone's hopefully seen the agenda, a few small things to go through, and then we'll kind of jump into all the funds and everything. So just want to quickly go over the purpose and role of the Budget Committee. Budget committees are set up by the ORS, by every city. And your main goal through the course of our meetings is to answer the question for yourself and the community is, does the proposed budget meet the goals of the City Council? It's pretty as plain and simple as that. You're welcome to ask whatever questions you have, anything that doesn't make sense, anything that you want to know more about. Myself, John, and some of our staff also join these meetings, so please do not hesitate to ask any questions, and we'd be happy to answer them along the way. So we have a few agenda items here. The first is to elect a new chair and vice chair nominations. So I will, is there anybody who would like to nominate a chair or vice chair?
Sure, I'll nominate Claire Cat for chair.
I'll second that.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for that nomination. I have to decline just because I'm managing a household with 3 little ones during these meetings, and it's kind of challenging to do bedtime and also keep meetings going. So this year it just won't work.
Okay. All right. How about Bill? Have you chaired?
Not for a number of years.
Well, I would like to nominate Bill then.
I'll second.
Any other nominations for chair? All right, well, we'll go ahead and do a vote. All in favor of Bill Eagle as chair of the budget committee, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. I do like to, just in case, Bill, I would like to try and get a nomination for a vice chair, just in case.
Yes, that's the next item on the agenda, and that is, and we're now we're looking for nomination for a vice chair. Do we have a nomination?
I just wonder if Claire, would you be, maybe if Claire, would you be willing to be vice chair?
Sounds like she's wrangling kids right now.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
She was giving
That
thumbs
which
up.
probably answers the question, probably.
No, she was giving thumbs up.
Oh, she was giving a thumbs up. Well, then,
I'm comfortable with that. If Bill needs extra support doing anything, I can be second tier.
Bill needs a tremendous amount of support.
I would like to nominate Claire Cat as vice chair of the budget committee.
Do we have a second for the nomination?
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. Are there any
Um,
further nominations? I don't think there are. Are there any further nominations? Are there any further nominations? There being no nominations, we're ready for the vote. Those in favor of electing Claire Cat, vice chair, say aye.
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 Those that are opposed, the same sign. Claire, you are vice chair. And the next item on the agenda is approval of prior year meeting minutes. Do we have has everyone had the opportunity to read prior year meeting minutes?
Yes, I have. I make a motion to approve last year's minutes.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Do you have any additions or corrections to those minutes? Those in favor of approving the minutes, last year's minutes?
Aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Minutes have been approved. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Is there any public comment? Does anyone in the public have any comment to make about the budget or the budget process? Those hearing no public comment, let the minutes please reflect that we did call for that. And it brings us back to Matt. You're next on the item where you're going to explain system development charges.
All right, thank you very much. Hey, we're 10 minutes ahead of schedule. All right, so you have a 4 packets for tonight that were stapled together. The first one is system development charges. So for those that are new to the budget process, system development charges are development fees that a developer or somebody building a home pays to the city of St. Helens for their share of the infrastructure costs of said product: water, sewer, streets, and storms. And they are priced to pay their share of the impact to the system for future growth and development. These are usually set by the finance department along with the building official, and goes through a number of processes. We have not updated these in the last few years, so they've remained the same. I think over at least the last 2 or 3 years, if I recall correctly. We are currently going through updating our master plan processes for water, water, storm, and sewer. The sewer and storm one is already in progress, and I think ready to be completed probably by November, December. The water master plan is in the RFP process. So these are plans that are done by professional consultants where they look at the development needs of the city, the capacity of the city, and look at what may be needed in the future based on growth estimates, development in the future, any kind of improvements that need to be made. The last time we did a water master plan, I think was 87. Typically, it's standard practice, at least in my experience, to update these master plans every 7 years. Some cities do it every 5 years. And we have not done obviously the sewer one, the water one for a while. The sewer and storm is the same story. It was, I think, the mid to late 80s when we did our last complete master plan. Those master plans and the projects that are identified on those get put into the capital improvement plan, the CIP. That is typically in the budget as well, and kind of forecasts what big projects we have upcoming for the next 4 or 5 years. You'll notice I included the CIP in the packet of information, and the CIP for this next year is pretty lean. And that is on purpose, and that is because we are waiting for these master plans. We did not want to proceed on any plans that are currently in the old documents. That's what the previous CIP was built on. And so we are waiting for these master plans to be completed before we put anything into the CIP for the future. So I would envision next year's CIP will be full of a lot more projects. John, was there anything I forgot to mention about system development charges or that you wanted to talk about?
Just that, no, I think you framed the big picture right there, just that we're in a period of a lot of growth right now, and with all the development that reflects very favorably on our SDC charges. So it's a good time to go through, update, and adjust to the appropriate rates and things to meet the needs of our future.
So one thing you'll notice in every one of the SDC funds is that I appropriate to use every single dollar in the system development charges. So if there are resources or revenue, which resources would just be kind of a combination of revenue and the beginning fund balance. If it's $20 on the resources, I appropriate to spend $20. Now that does not mean that we are going to spend $20. The reason I appropriate those funds is to make sure that they are at least available for any kind of matching grants or improvements that need to happen throughout the year. So as most of you have probably heard, we're doing some park improvements at McCormick Park, the new playground. That is actually paid for by the Parks SDC. So those funds were appropriated and available to use for that project. So we were able to jump on the grant matching that we did for Campbell Park as well with some of the funds that were available. With all said and done, I appropriate to spend everything. However, I do not expect that the city will actually spend, for instance, in streets SDC, I don't expect to spend $968,000 this next year, but I at least appropriate it so that it is available. I'm happy to answer any questions over the SDC funds, if there are any.
Hey, Matt, I just had a comment on the reason we appropriate them is because if we do not, then even though they are specifically for that, and we run up against like funding where we can get matching funds and we don't have it appropriated, then we can't use it, even though it's in there.
That is correct. So if funds are not appropriated in some category, they are placed into unappropriated funds. And the only way that we can move legally funds from an unappropriated line item to an appropriated line item is through a declaration of emergency by the city council or the governor.
So how do you track, say you appropriated a certain amount of funds and then we didn't end up using all of that? How do you track that?
It goes right back into the beginning fund balance for the next year.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm just curious about how some of the funds are going up in terms of the proposed compared to last year, and some are going down. So I mean, what explain or accounts for some going up, some going down?
Most of them are going up in the next year. The only one that is technically going down is, and it's just a forecasted, which is Parks SDC. If you look on the detail in your packet, it's on the last page on the back, and charges for services are estimated the year end at $175,000 for this current year, and they are proposed at $100,000. The reason for that is, and actually if you look at the previous column, 2021, the adopted budget for this year, we actually only adopted $50,000, but we got in $175,000. That is mainly because of the apartment complex that has gone in and the number of developments that John had mentioned earlier that we've seen. So we saw a huge jump in Parks SDC funds for those reasons. So I expect it to be a little bit higher, but I don't expect it to get to the 175 mark.
Okay.
Matt,
Okay.
go ahead, Patrick.
No, I was going to say also thank you. I was looking at all the bold stuff, and my eyes are tired. I didn't see that some of the total resources included the fund balance available, etc. So anyway, thank you for helping me to see that. Go ahead, Claire.
Matt, my question might be a little bit in the weeds, but I'm curious. When I asked actually some unrelated questions to the budget to you, I learned that our Parks SDC fund can only be used at McCormick Park. Is that correct? And can you explain that to me, why that park is the only one that is able to access these funds?
Yep. So that stems back to in 2015 when the city completed its Parks Master Plan. Within the Parks Master Plan, Jenny Dimshow, who did do an awesome job at doing that Parks Master Plan, but she categorized each park into a specific category. Whether it's a neighborhood park, whether it's a nature park, and there's like 5 or 6 different categories. And based on how we classify those parks, we count up the acreage of those parks in each category. And based on the 2010 and future population estimates, we use some calculations that are used standardized in the Parks and Trails system national wide, as well as our Oregon standards, as far as figuring out how much acreage of each category is needed for our population size. And so if that category, if we have an abundance over in, let's say neighborhood parks. According to the formula, it says we need 13 acres of neighborhood parks, and we have 18. Okay, well, if you're over, then you can't use system development charges for any of those parks, for any improvements, replacements, or anything. System development charges are legally not obtainable to be used for that park. Now, if you go into a nature park, for example, let's say we're under that category. So if by population in the formula, it says that we need 20 acres of nature parks and we have 13. Well, because we're under, now we can actually use system development charges to either purchase land or do improvements to the existing parks within that category. So there are, I say one park, which is McCormick. There are actually two parks that we can use system development charges on. The other park is Sand Island. And it's the reason for that is because it's in another category. So I didn't include Sand Island in my email to you, Claire, just because Sand Island is now managed by the marina, and it's kind of, they do everything. So we don't, the city doesn't necessarily have to put any money into that. It's kind of its own thing.
What I'm hearing is park system development charges can be used at McCormick, at Sand Island, or to purchase property to fill gaps in the parks master plan. Essentially, I mean, it's much more complicated than that, but possibly buying more property.
Yeah, within categories that we are underserved.
And is there a place online I can find the current parks master plan that you referenced?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, let me go ahead and pull it up on the internet, and then I'll share my screen again to show you exactly, because we actually had this.
You can just drop the link in the chat too, so we don't eat up too much time.
No, that's okay. It's good information, and there's some new people here, so I want to make sure that they're getting their money's worth, so to speak. Okay, so here is the.
Well, and how often do you update the master plan for the parks? It's been 6 years.
So the last time we did the parks was 2015, and that was when Jenny Dimshow did that. And that was kind of, if my understanding is correct, and John can correct me, it was kind of her first big project as being part of the city. And so she took that on all on her own and used some best practices and created that master plan. We have plans with Mohammed, our new public works director, and our new parks and recreation manager, Shauna, to redo and update that master plan this next upcoming year. Because I think there are some opportunities to look at other parks, and a lot of things have changed since 2015. So we want to make sure and have the most up-to-date information so that we can best utilize SDC funds. So if there is a way for a professional consultant to come in and say, you know what, if you categorize this park as a nature park instead of a neighborhood park, we could use more of that funding to improve. So it's just kind of looking at those kind of variables to make sure that we can best utilize the funds we have. Okay, so just real quickly, under Parks and Recreation, and all the way at the bottom is the Parks and Trails Master Plan for 2015. And I believe it is page, I want to say 46. Nope, I was almost right. 43. Let's see. So these are the averages and the formulas that are used and the different categories. So this is just kind of backing up the data and information that she used to get to the formulas and how much we actually need. You can see which category on the next page of what park is in each category, and then their acreage. And then down here, this is what I use. So regional parks and urban plaza meets, community parks, neighborhood parks needs, and so that's kind of those different categories of where we can use SDC funds. The other thing to keep in mind, I forgot to mention, is to use Parks SDC funds, we have to use them for projects that are identified in the Parks Master Plan. That's the other carrot, the other half of the carrot stick. So if we, let's say if we have, take McCormick Park and we're putting in a new playground there. We can use SDC funds because park or the playground structure is something mentioned in the master plan that is needed. However, if we said, hey, we're going to put a new volleyball sand court in there, well, we can't actually do that because that's not a project that's been identified in the parks master plan. So we want to try and put as many projects and stuff into the master plan because you just never know when funds can be available.
Matt, a quick question on these great plans. Who set up the framework for these? Did we have any input in it, or was this something given to us by the state?
As council and staff, there is typically an RFP process for a consultant or a company that comes in and does master plans. For the sewer and storm, it was an RFP process that the city council approved, as well as approving the vendor that was selected. It would be the same thing for the Parks Master Plan. We would go out for an RFP process. The city council would have to approve that, as well as the contract, and could be part of the selection committee as well.
Oh, but I'm wondering about who says we have to have so many acres of parks and lanes and so many for baseball fields. Is that us or is that the state?
That is not us. That is mainly the state and other national organizations, like national parks and those kind of organizations that kind of set the standard of what should and you shouldn't have as far as a population wise.
So we have to chew on their hunk of bread and hopefully we get the end that we want. Otherwise we're stuck.
Yeah, as I kind of mentioned before, I personally think it's about having the right consultant that knows how to play the game, and to make sure that we categorize parks the best we can to best utilize system development charges.
Well, I see St. Helens as a very peculiar individualistic town, which really doesn't match a whole lot of standard towns across the country, but we're still stuck with the standard towns across the country formulas. That's about it.
In a
Okay.
nutshell, yes. Yep.
So when one gets frustrated, it's not your fault. It's I'm because some of these things like nature parks and things like that look like it would be super ideal for us. And we're so small. Nature park is in our neighborhood anyway, so it covers two. Oh, okay.
Like I said, it's all about having the right consultant that knows how to play the game and how to best categorize parks and use the numbers to the best of our advantage so that we can best utilize all the funds that we have available.
Okay.
Were there any other questions about SDCs?
We're going to talk more about parks further, right? Further than just the SDCs.
Yeah, so specifically for parks, this is just about system development charges. The Parks Department is actually in the general fund, which will be discussed at the April 27th meeting.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That was a pretty deep dive for the budget committee right there. Essentially, it needs to be defensible to the standard practices is kind of what it is. Your fee has to tie to your projects, and backing up to Jenny Dimshow's work on the Parks Master Plan. It didn't even come, her work did not even include a capital facilities plan with component with it. And we actually said, what's a plan without a plan without projects, right? So we had her come on, stay on, develop that list of projects and kind of, wrap it up. And it served our need for a while and did a great job, but the next generation here. And also Doug Morton was at the rec center, so he's rushing back home to get connected, so.
No worries. Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll move on to special revenue funds. So that is another stapled packet for you. The first fund that we have in special revenue is community development. So this encompasses economic planning, the industrial business park, the riverfront, forestry. Tourism was added last year, or this year. I think it was added this year, current year. And so in the stapled packet, pages 2 and 3 show a summary of all the revenue sources, as well as on page 3 is a summary of all the expenses. One thing I guess to note here that is different than in previous years, you can see what we are anticipating for the motel hotel tax. Obviously, we're still going through COVID, and we do expect some downfalls from previous years, but this is based on what we are currently seeing on our motel hotel taxes in this current year. So kind of continuing that forward. Timber, we are expecting to do another cut of timber. So that is the estimated revenue shown there in the miscellaneous revenues. Property taxes, that is a reimbursement that we get from Cascades Tissue. We pay all the property taxes on the industrial business park, and then I send them a bill. And John, just a reminder, I sent them a bill in November for this last year and they haven't paid yet. Just FYI. Along with everything else. Let's see. On the expenses side, I will quickly mention, you'll see a new department that's been created, which is the Central Waterfront. For those of you that don't know, that is the wastewater treatment plant area that we still plan on moving forward in additional planning and studies for the lagoon repurposing. So there are some funds that are appropriated there to continue that study process. On the debt service, you see the Boise note. Obviously, that's for the Boise property purchase. And then you'll see the Veneer note with no debt service payment. The reason there is no debt service payment there is because the Veneer note was included in a refunding bond that we did along with water and sewer debt, and kind of combined it all into one and saved, it was about $980,000 over the course of the remaining of the loan. So we included that and just kind of paid that off in that bond. So that's why you don't see any more debt service for that payment. There is additional kind of more detailed information on the funds in the future pages. And John and myself are happy to answer any questions regarding any of the expenses that you see for any of these departments.
I have a question about the tourism. So you're proposing that in 2021, 22, we're going to be almost triple what we were in 2021 for resources. And why is that?
The biggest reason is we are, at least as of right now, I am anticipating that Tina will run Halloween Town similarly to how it was ran this year as a ticketed event. The city saw a very large revenue increase from tickets this year, as opposed to previous years when we weren't charging tickets for visits. So that revenue for the $420,000 is actually almost an exact copy of what we saw in revenue this past year for Halloween Town.
You mean 2019?
No, and so in the adopted column for 2021, you'll see revenue was originally adopted at $180,000.
Right.
What we actually received is close to about $450,000 this year. So you will see that number on the estimated year end when we get to that point and the audit is completed. But because we did a ticketed event this year, we saw a lot more revenue.
Okay. And so then on the next page, we're looking at expenditures and we look at tourism and we're looking at 500K. So we're looking at actually being in the red. Is that what you're projecting?
No, I'm projecting that we would be zero in the black, and that's how I kind of budget the department. So you have the 420 in the event revenue, as well as the motel and hotel tax, which is $80,000. So that would be the $500,000.
Okay.
And then just to make it a zero, I budget to expense the same amount of $500,000. And you can see that breakdown of what that 500 is. So it's $10,000 in utilities. That is basically the utilities for internet and power at the building that tourism is actually renting. And then $120,000, which is the contracted agreement payment for E2C. And then $370,000 is budgeted for event expenses.
Okay. That makes sense. So, but you are thinking that we're just going to break even on tourism.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Correct.
That's fine. Thank you, Matt.
Yep. And I would like to say, now I can't speak for what Tina has planned for this upcoming year. I would like to say that she's not going to spend that $370,000 that is appropriated. However, just to make everything zero at the end of the year for the budget, I just show that $370,000 are appropriated to be expensed. But I don't anticipate that she would spend that much based on previous years. If you look at how much she has spent in previous years, 285, 258. And then I think she was about 200, 225 at the end of the 2020 year, because she had a lot of expenses that went over for like COVID stuff for this past Halloween Town. So I would love to say that it's going to be in the green. However, as a government entity, we don't like to budget for pluses and negatives. We just like to be zero at the end of the year.
Well, we have to consider we still have COVID regulations. So,
Correct.
yeah, okay.
Yep.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep. Any other questions on the Economic Development Fund? Or the Community Development Fund, I should say. Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to the Community Enhancement Fund. This is mainly used for specific grants that come into the city. The library has used it for a number of years for a number of grants that they receive. Margaret is here if you have any questions specifically for the library department. Other than that, we have a few other departments that use this. The police department has used it in the past for a grant that they received from the state and federal government. That grant is no longer being used, but we also have parks and recreation that uses it. It's kind of basically just used as a fund to track grant money, essentially. So there's nothing too, I would say, surprising or off the wall on this fund. Did anybody have any questions on the community enhancements? Okay, moving along to the street fund. So street fund mainly gets its revenue from the motor vehicle taxes and then any grant reimbursements that we receive from the state to do improvements. It's pretty typical from previous years. I wouldn't say there's anything too surprising. You'll notice this is probably the first part I'll bring up, the Public Works Fund, and streets falls under Public Works. You'll notice in the personnel services that those have gone down from the previous year. In 2021, this current year, they were adopted at 558, and we are looking at $476,000. That is from a number of adjustments and improvements and changes and efficiencies for the new Public Works Director, Mohammed, that he has made over the course of just even the last 4 months that he's been here or so. So you'll see that in some of the other enterprise funds where there are changes in some materials and services and personnel changes, and those are related to changes that he's made just indirectly in his department.
I'm sorry, I totally missed something on the last one in the Community Enhancement Fund.
Oh,
I
yeah.
was wondering, sorry, I didn't mean to jump back, but
No, you're
I
fine.
wasn't moving fast enough. I was looking at the transitional housing expenditures. Can you explain what that is and why we're decreasing it?
So that is kind of it's another one of those zero, dollar in and dollar out, so to speak. We get funds, then we act as an intermediary between us and Community Action Team for those grants. So in previous years, John Ellis had always budgeted $20,000 in for grants and $20,000 out. So somebody repays or sells a house that had a loan on it from an improvement that was done 10 years ago or something. And so that loan is repaid, it's paid to the city, and then the city turns back and writes the same amount check to CAT so that they can lend it out again. So it's kind of an in and an out. And that's what that transitional housing grant is. It's just always been called transitional housing, so I've just kind of kept that name. But it is basically just a pass through as an intermediary financial.
Thank you, Matt.
Yep. Anybody have any questions on the street fund?
Yes.
Yeah.
And this goes beyond your control. but hopefully your magic widget will help us. We hear a lot of talk at the federal government level about building better streets, bridges, et cetera, et cetera. If that really comes through, can we transition to gathering more money from this, or are we stuck with this layout of funds?
So are you talking about potential additional revenue from the federal
Yes.
and
Yeah.
state level? I know John and Mohammed have been working on that, and so I'm going to let them kind of take a snapshot. I see John unmuted himself, so he's ready to talk.
Yeah, well, I think the question is, and yes, we are tracing money in every direction right now. It's just an absolute frenzy. But the question is, where does the money land in our budget? I think is
That's correct.
Yeah.
Are we so set that we can't put it in is what I'm afraid of. I wanted a way to get it in.
Right. Yeah, and there is an exception for budgeted revenue. You don't need necessarily have to have that in your budget as part of the approval of your budget process. So if we get a big grant and land one of these big federal grants we're chasing after, that we would be able to spend that money. So, and if you go into the community enhancement fund is the place where it goes.
Yeah, a great example are the COVID funds that we received this year from the state and the Department of Administrative Services. That is technically not in the budget for this year, but we received those grant funds and we expended those grant funds. And what you will see, Councilor Topaz, is in June, usually the first meeting in June is when I will do a reappropriation of the entire budget. And we basically reapprove the updated budget to include all of those funding resources to make sure that we are technically appropriating them by the end of the fiscal year.
I'm always worried about these rules that the state dumps on us that we can't do this and we can't do that. And that was really what precipitated the question.
Yeah, the flip side of that is that if we go and we budget for anticipated grants that we haven't landed, then we can get in a real overstated kind of situation in a hurry. So we like.
Yeah, I know. I'm more worried about what the rules nail us to, whatever direction. I was hoping we had some freeway, and evidently, with extra money, we have a little bit of freeway.
Yeah, as John mentioned with grants, at least I've seen it on a very small scale here because we typically don't receive a lot of large grants. But specifically in the general fund, the last couple of years, I have specifically not put anything in grant revenue because I don't want to build our expenses for personnel and materials and services on grants that I don't know 100% that we are going to get. But if they do come in, like I said, we always just do a reappropriated budget at the end of the fiscal year.
So there is a mechanism to do it. That's what
Yes,
I'm
there
worried
is.
about.
Yep, and I do a reappropriation of the budgeted funds every June, just to clean up anything that needs to be done before the end of the fiscal year. Any other questions on the street fund? All right. We will go ahead and move to the internal service funds. So this has a number of funds that I'm going to go through. The first is the equipment fund. Typically, in the past, before our new public works director, Mohammed, came in, the equipment fund has been used to kind of be a placeholder for large equipment purchases, typically from our public works department or our parks department. And we have 2 mechanics that are out of the equipment fund in our personnel services in the previous years. This is all being moved to the Public Works Operations Fund. The balance, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. The personnel side of things and the materials and services that are typically in this fund are being moved into Public Works Operations. That is just to simplify the number of funds and the management of those funds. The city, as of right now, is not making any adjustments to any personnel, so we will still have 2 mechanics. Their personnel services costs will just show up in the Public Works Operations Fund. So you'll notice that there is a $412,000 fund balance available, and you see $412,000 as a transfer line item. We are actually moving these funds to another internal service fund called major maintenance, so that we ensure that those funds are kept for equipment purchases for public works in the future. So we're not taking money from public works or anything that they've saved up in the past for future equipment purchases. We're just trying to simplify some of our funds. And if I can always get rid of a fund and simplify something, I'm always up for that. So Mohammed has graciously been okay with transferring all those funds and personnel around just to simplify things a little bit more. So that's what's going on in the equipment fund. Are there any questions about that? Seeing and hearing none. Move on to the IT services funds. This is pretty much a status quo. We have the same thing as the previous years as far as our IT fund charges out to each department. So we actually charge every department their specific amount for IT charges that is based on the number of phones they have, the number of computers they have, what kind of internet service they have at their specific building. So all those are kind of built into one charge to each department. We have one IT specialist person that is part of the personnel services, and then the standard materials and services. One of the largest expense in there is the professional services. That is a contract that the city holds with More Power to provide additional IT support assistance. And then, as some of you may know, we've kind of been going through some updates in our IT infrastructure and coming to the tail end of that here at the end of the year. And a little bit may bleed into the summer months, July and August, but overall we've done, I think, a pretty good job the last couple of years after what had happened with the IT incident that happened a year or so ago with the city. And so we have basically rebuilt our entire IT infrastructure over the course of this last year and a half. Any questions about the IT fund? Okay. Next one here is the Public Works Operations Fund. So this is home to the Public Works Operations as well as the Engineering Department. Not too many things that have been noted here. One thing that's new, you'll see in the detail grants of $15,000. We are actually moving from the general fund. The city receives a grant every year from Oregon Marine Board for dock improvements or anything that we do. We're actually moving that from the general fund into Public Works Operations as well as the dock services. And that is mainly because it is Public Works that usually has to go out there to fix anything over there. So if they're the ones fixing it, then they should be the ones expending that as well as getting the offsetting revenue for that. So we're just transitioning that from the general fund to this fund. Let's see. I'm not sure if there's anything else. I do see Mohammed is on the line here. I'm not sure if he wants to talk about anything specifically in the Public Works Department. Mohammed?
Thank you, Matt. I think you've done an excellent job going through kind of the details of the why, the how, the numbers. And as you mentioned, the goal here this year in the first just 5 months, we collaboratively working with the city administration and the finance department, we were able to re-examine at least the public works budget and find ways to be more efficient and restructure these funds to be more transparent and focus on really what the city really needs and how can we improve with the resources we have. So as you've seen earlier, we've had some close to 80 grand, I believe, in cost saving going forward, and we're going to continue to re-examine the budget as it's a big responsibility in the public works is fiscal responsibility and collaborative between other departments, and we continue to improve. It's a process. It's constantly in the area of improvement. So happy to answer any questions if anybody has any. Looking forward for kind of our upcoming capital improvement projects, and we have a lot in the works that's really going to take our city to the next level.
Thanks, Mohammed.
Thank you.
Any questions? Not seeing any.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
On the last page of expenditures, I feel like I'm the only one asking questions. Sorry about that, but I'm a curious one. So on the last page, it shows projects and programs, 75,000, but it doesn't really explain what that is. What is that?
Gotcha. Yeah, so that is actually a carryover from this current year. At the beginning or at this time last year when we were doing the budget for this year, it was anticipated that the engineering and the planning department were going to redo the aerial images of a huge map that we used to have in the council chambers. And it was done maybe 10 or so years ago, I want to say maybe a little bit more. And so they had gone out and got a price quote to actually do that re-imaging. It's not going to happen this year, just as far as timing and the number of projects that they have. So this is a carryover from the previous year of the $75,000. And so it's $75,000 for the engineering department just because they use it the most. However, planning uses it as well. So you'll see in the general fund budget, $25,000 from the planning department to help pay for that project, which is anticipated they're going to do it this next year.
Thank you, Matt.
All right.
Matt,
Yeah.
no, I'm surprised to see no overtime budgeted. Is that just because restructuring of the department is really leading into higher efficiencies and not a need for overtime? And if so, that's fabulous. Is that the story?
That is mainly the story, and I'm not sure if I want to give credit to Mohammed and John as well for kind of taking some best practices that have been used at other places and helping control the overtime that is seen in public works to what is more appropriate. And so any overtime that is used has to be approved by Mohammed as the department manager. And so he has kind of put a more of a limit on what can and can't be used for overtime. So that's why you see the change there. Just a shift in policy.
And thank you, Matt. And just to kind of build up Claire on your question, we're really trying to work really hard on focusing on how to be efficient. Efficiency is a critical part, and improving processes within public works and utilizing the workforce we have in the right kind of time. This is where we're looking at these areas of what you call Lean Six Sigma, efficient process improvement within the city. That kind of I've used it a lot back in the private sector when I worked in transportation industry. And so it's been working very well. And as you mentioned, it's a significant change just within the current fiscal year, and moving forward, it will continue to improve further.
All right, so we will go ahead and move forward to the major maintenance fund. A couple little changes in here. As I mentioned before, the funds from the equipment fund, the $412,000 is being moved into the major maintenance fund. And you'll see a transfer in there of $1,012,000. There are additional funds being transferred into there from the water and sewer fund, and that is particularly for the purchase, the final payment of the church property at 2625 on Gable Road that the city council has decided to move forward with. And part of the payment of that is to use some of the fund balance from water and sewer to help pay for that purchase. So we are actually appropriating to transfer those funds from the water and sewer fund into the major maintenance. And then you'll see down in the detail of the major maintenance fund, you'll see a large purchase, large cost there for the recreation center. That is for the remainder of the purchase, as well as some probably minor improvements that are needed for the building.
So Matt, how is this is the second payment or the second half installment?
Correct.
Did the first payment look when you go to do your amendments to last year's budget, will it look the same? Essentially, the money's coming from the same place, just a different fiscal year?
Correct. The $240,000 is what the first payment was. And then the remainder at the actual sale price was $700,000. And so that's part of this 560. The $240,000, when I do that kind of reappropriation at the end of the fiscal year, you'll see that $240,000 come out of the general fund. Any other questions there? You'll see the $180,000 for Campbell Park. That is for the matching part of the grant that was received for those improvements. So we anticipate that coming to a close here, hopefully sometime soon. The $163,000 for the library, they used to have money set aside in the Community Enhancement Fund for building improvements. And I wanted to make sure that those funds were not commingled with other departments in the Community Enhancement Fund. As the last few years, the Community Enhancement Fund has kind of gotten more and more added into it. And so because we have this major maintenance fund, it's kind of intention is for building improvements or any kind of those things. So I have moved those funds a couple years ago into this major maintenance fund, and that $163,000 is what I estimate will be the available amount of those funds. I don't anticipate that Margaret is going to be using $163,000 for building improvements. However, it is at least appropriated for use if it is needed. Any other questions on the major maintenance fund? Okay, we'll move on to the next one, which is a new fund. We have two new funds.
Brian, I did.
yeah.
Sorry. And I emailed you about this and you answered it, and I just need a little bit more clarification. So police station, there's $50,000 proposed for this fiscal year, and clearly that doesn't even scratch the surface on actual building. So can you talk to me, $50,000, what might those funds actually be used for? Especially as council hasn't really made clear definitive answers about like which direction this project is going.
Correct. So the city council and staff are still working on the funding mechanisms and how that's all going to work out. We are still planning on, and a contract was approved to move forward on the next stage of planning as far as the building is concerned. And that is a consultant, West Consultants, to come in and do a study on the FEMA 500 and 100 year floodplain zones that are mapped in that area. And the cost of that contract, those professional services, was about $35,000. And so that is kind of worked into that $50,000, which was a guess that I put back in January, February timeframe when I was putting the budget together. So we anticipate to at least have those. If the city council decides to move forward with a funding mechanism or something, that will be adjusted at the end of the year in June when we do that reappropriation time.
Thank you.
Yep. So move on quickly to the debt service fund. Some of you may or may not know the city holds a number of different debt services from a number of different sources. And so one thing that has always been kind of at least a common practice in past cities that I have been at is to create an actual fund for debt service in which all the debt service money is transferred into it, and then the debt service payments are paid directly out of it. So this is moving the refunding bond that we did this current fiscal year into this fund. So the money from water, sewer, and streets is transferred into the debt service fund, and then we pay the debt service out of this fund. So it's kind of really just moving the cup from here to here, so to speak. But the auditors like it, and it's kind of a best practice in my field. Any questions on the debt service fund? And then the second new fund, which we are creating in anticipation, whether the city council decides to ultimately approve a public safety fund or a utility fee, or go out to the voters in some way or fashion for that public safety fund, or a general obligation bond or some other method, we still have to create a fund per se. So this is an anticipated ordinance that will go to city council hopefully before the end of the fiscal year to actually create this fund for the sole purpose of building a public safety facility. So whatever method they decide to go with, we still have to have a fund. So this is just putting it in the in the budget in anticipation of that. Any questions on the public safety funds? All right. We'll keep chugging along. Still 20 minutes ahead of schedule. All right. So let's talk about the enterprise funds. This is the water, sewer, and storm. We'll start off with the water fund you see here on the screen. I included the water fund forecast. The blue bars are the ending fund balance. The orange bar you see going across, or the line, is the 90-day reserve policy. That is part of our financial policies, to always have at least 90 days of cash available on hand for emergencies. That is pretty much a standard policy for other cities. Some cities have 60 days. I have seen some cities with 30 days. It just kind of depends on the city and organization and the city manager or finance director that happens to be there at the time. So you can see the water fund is fairly healthy. On the third page in your packet, you'll see the summary of resources and expenses. As you saw in the street fund, you see personnel services has gone down from 986 to 918. Let's see, what else is there? The capital outlay of $250,000, that ties back to the CIP plan, which is basically just the essentials this year. It's basic water main replacements and water meter replacements throughout there. So you see the $800,000 transfer in the summary. That transfer goes to the debt service fund for the debt service payment. And then I always hold 90 days in unappropriated fund balance. That is the 90-day reserve policy. That is basically 90 days of expenses for this fund. And then I put the rest in contingency. Like I do with the SDC charges, I like to at least appropriate funds to make sure they are available. We never know when grant funds are going to come available, or matching grant funds are going to come for a main water line potential replacement. So if they are at least appropriated in contingency, then I can move them up to capital outlay or materials and services or whatever may be needed to complete a project. But they were at least appropriated. Any questions on the water fund that either myself, John, or Mohammed, who is here, can answer?
On the one big elephant we've got in the house right now is the reservoir. Where does that come in this funds? Under what category is that repair or what?
So I have not heard as far as how we are moving forward. I know Mohammed was going to talk about potential litigation with the Linear and the company that was used. Mohammed, did you want to jump in?
Yes. So we are currently, Council Topaz, in the process of pursuing litigation against the company who worked on this particular project. I cannot kind of comment and go into a lot of details. We have an executive session coming up very soon to discuss the options, but we are seeking a full project cost as one of the options, and we're working towards other mitigation plans, such as potentially getting a temporary, a company that can come over, or a new vendor that can work with us on fixing this. But we cannot take any step forward until we get the outcome of the litigation we're pursuing. However, I'm looking forward for a very positive outcome, and we're taking all possible steps to recoup the cost of the project and have a solution as soon as possible. So this falls into one of those critical projects that I have on my project list from our Public Works Engineering. And we're taking all proper steps to really tackle it 100%.
And
okay,
as
so there's no line item right now. This is what we're doing. What we're doing, but it is not on this paper yet.
Correct. It is not on this
Okay.
paper. It
That-
would
that-
actually be one of those things that is kind of like a grant, so to speak. So if it comes in, we can record it and then reappropriate
Okay.
it at the end of the year and expense it. So it would be something similar to that.
Yeah, that was the question is, it's, we didn't forget it and not put it on here. Something else is happening.
That is correct.
Okay, good.
Correct, yep.
Councilor Morton.
I had a very similar question about how do those funds, if we are successful in the litigation process, and how do those funds show up? Or how is the work redirected in the future if, again, we are successful? And if we aren't successful, is that are those line items that you have there appropriate, and are they true then?
They are true for what we're anticipating as of today. I will point out that in the water fund, we do have a contingency amount that's appropriated, which is a little bit over $3.4 million.
Got it.
At any time as a worst case scenario, let's say litigation does not go through, we don't get anything, we have to repair it tomorrow. We can pull those funds from the contingency for whatever amount we need to complete this project on our own if we had to.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the waterfront?
So I don't know if you guys have already discussed this previously, but I constantly get questions asked from citizens regarding why their water bills are so high. Can you maybe offer me an explanation so that I can explain?
I can. Would you like the 2-minute version or the 27-minute version?
2-minute will work perfectly because that's all I spend on. That's all I plan on explaining it. So.
I tend to get on my soapbox a little bit about rates. Think back to about 7, 8, 10, 15, 20 years ago when St. Helens was hopping with Boise, Cascades, Armstrong, and those big industrial customers. Unfortunately, St. Helens is no different than any other community that has big business and big industry, is that residential rates are often subsidized by larger industrial customers because of their impact on the system. When Boise leaves, when Armstrong left actually when I was just getting started here. That loss of Armstrong as a company for the city of St. Helens meant about $1 million loss in revenue to the sewer fund. And it's the same story with Boise, along with a couple other companies that have left town in the past. When big industry leaves, it still has the infrastructure and maintenance of requirements of our wastewater treatment plant, for example. That plant was built specifically for those large businesses in town. And when they leave, we still have to maintain that large wastewater treatment plant. I think last time I spoke to Aaron, he said it was 10 times larger than what the city actually needed. So those rates have to be passed on to the remaining customers. And unfortunately, in many cases, that is the residential customers. And for several years, the city did not do what I would consider personally best practices, which are slow, steady increases over every year, 1-2% every single year. And the reason we do that is so that we try and recapture any business that is lost, as well as keep up with inflation and personnel costs that increase every year. And we do those 1 and 2% increases every year. That way we don't get to a point where the city has to do a 10% increase or a 15% increase. And unfortunately, the city at the council at that time, shortly before I came in, I believe it was one of John Ellis's last or second to last year before he retired from the city here, where they had to propose those 10% increases. And I know our citizens still remember that to this day, and still bring it up to me and our utility billing folks as well. And as you get asked every day now, why our utility rates are that high. I want to quickly show the budget committee a chart that the city council saw at our last meeting, or a couple of meetings ago, maybe last meeting. It's hard to remember yesterday. Allow me 1 second to pull this up. And it was the comparison of rates that I did and updated as of December last year.
Sorry, I didn't mean to like go off on a
No, you're perfectly fine.
field there, but
This is what the budget committee is for, is to ask those questions and for us to answer.
I appreciate it.
Okay, so on the graph here, you will see a number of cities, both near and regionally located to us. I do want to mention, this is based on a family of 4, 2 adults and 2 children. And it's obviously based on our monthly billing. You can see St. Helens right in the middle here. The blue is water. The kind of orangish color is wastewater, so the sewer. And the yellow is stormwater. You'll see City of Hillsborough has gray, which is a streets transportation fee. And the green is any kind of other fee. So that for the City of St. Helens, particularly right now, we have the community rec fee, that's $2. That is that green bar. For a number of other cities, take Cornelius, I used to live there. That $10 is literally called a general service fee. And it goes straight into their general fund and they can use it for whatever they want. But it's $10 a month, whether your bill is $1 or $500. The Hillsborough has a number of fees depending on where you live in. Specifically, if you live in the new South Hillsborough development, they tack on an extra fee to your utility bill to help pay for the fiber connection that they are building in that development. And there's a number of other specific Hillsborough areas that have little specific fees on their utility bills. So this kind of shows you where St. Helens is. I will say, and I think I mentioned this at the city council meeting when I brought this graph up, obviously we get asked a lot as staff members and our utility billing staff. And oftentimes, at least in my experience, and this is just my personal experience, I often find that people that are asking those questions are those that have just recently moved into the city and are coming off of a well. And so they're used to not paying anything for their water. So going from paying $0 to $100 is a big jump. And of course there are variables. So like I said, this is based on a family of 4. Whether that family of 4 uses the same amount of water as your family of 4. I mean, there are a lot of variables. Running toilets can be a big problem, as many people have found out. So this kind of gives you at least an idea of what other cities are based on at least this average family of 4.
Well, Matt,
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, just to be clear, this is not just water. This is water in your sewer getting delivered to the treatment plant, and your storm water, which is when you drive your car, it collects all over the roads, goes out through our storm system. So we have to maintain that, and that's what this is here for.
Yeah, for the mayor, like you mentioned, the storm is a big one because people will often call the city and say, well, I don't have a storm drain in front of my house, so why should I pay for storm? Well, we have to remind them that they're paying for the storm on all of the roads that they drive on every single day to go to the grocery store, to go to work. So you're paying for this system as a whole, not just your individual house.
Yeah. Yep.
Matt, a question on the other direction. Obviously, we've got a water system, you've got fire plugs. Does the fact we have a water system cut down on our insurance? And is there any way to characterize that? Again, the guy with the well doesn't have a fire hydrant.
I am unsure how to answer that question.
So there are ISO ratings that do affect the city's insurance rating, and that we've had.
Yeah,
some-
I'm talking about it for the whole city. Obviously, we've got a water system. Does that help us as overall reduce our fire insurance or that cost?
It would have to, yes. So the fact that we have a ISO rating means it would be lower with a fire system. I want to make a point about rates, and that's that, a real common technique for keeping rates low is to defer capital expenses, to not make those expensive strategic investments and, look long-term. And particularly with the water fund, we didn't do that. Times were tough, but we moved forward and we built this microfiltration plant. It's state of the art and the thing's just about paid for now. And, we should really be thankful that we have the quality of the treatment facility that we have out there. Yeah.
I just wanted to follow up.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, John, if I interrupted you.
No, it just comes out in rates. There's a debt service related to that, and it comes through in the utility rates.
So my follow-up question was, Matt, you brought up how the percentages got really high there for a while because we didn't do a taper into it. And do you anticipate those rates to continue to go higher, or that percentage, or what do you look at?
I will say that at least through this calendar year, I don't anticipate going to the city council and requesting any rate increases. I would actually prefer to wait till all of the master plans are done. That includes the sewer and storm plan that is anticipated to be done at the end of this calendar year, and the water fund water master plan that would be done shortly after that. I assume sometime in 2022. Hopefully. And then once we know what kind of capital projects we are looking at in the future, we can also identify how those incorporate those into the rates. As you'll see in the water and sewer fund, we have pretty healthy fund balances. In the storm fund, not so much. But the reason we have those fund balances is because we've had these capital projects that we've been saving for over the number of years. But I don't want to steal all the thunder. I see Mohammed has his hand up. So Mohammed?
Yeah, just kind of to add my 2 cents to this discussion. And Matt, you were right about the times of those master plans. And once we have those completed, which the last one, the water you mentioned, will be completed by March of next year, we'll have a much better idea about rates and infrastructure investment and capital improvement regarding the water treatment and the water system we have. But one thing I can also mention to our counselor and leadership team, if you engage with the community, I highly recommend that you send anybody from the city or the kids or the schools to take a little tour in our wastewater treatment plant and water filtration, because in the past, after I engage with our supervisors, it has been one of those very informative and great area of kind of learning about how the water treatment plant works and where the water comes from, whether it's sewer, whether it's storm, and the state-of-the-art micro processing filtration facility that we have as well. It's a great place where we can also explain the infrastructure costs and show anybody who's interested from the city on a tour how they work and kind of how these costs are developed and where does the water come from, where does it go. So I think it would be great. So if anybody interested or you know anyone, please send them my way, and I'm more than happy to engage and get that information out, because it does educate people on how these systems work and the costs associated with the water bill, et cetera, et cetera.
Sometimes they get lonely too.
Yeah, absolutely. That too. So it's a great, the team are very eager to really showcase these treatment plan, and they would love to have, citizen, community, kids, anybody who's interested to learn, they're willing and more than happy to do so.
I think I need a tour now. Thanks, Mohammed.
You'd love it. I spend myself 6 hours in each plan just to learn the process from A to Z. And I can tell you, I'm fascinated by this entire plants and what they do. So it's a great learning experience.
Patrick, you had your hand up.
Yeah, speaking about the tours, well, actually one of my, this isn't what I was going to speak about, but since Mohammed did mention tours, one of my favorite 6th grade field trips was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, going to the city treatment plant. It was fascinating. And also, I don't know if this might be a potential source for revenue. I don't know if anybody else does it, but the Milwaukee system, they take their byproduct and sell it as fertilizer. And they sell it as fertilizer. So I don't know if that's something we can look at.
Thanks,
or
Patrick.
have the, but But my question, and I think this is related to what Jessica or Councilor Chilton was asking about funds going up and down, possibly going down. Please help me understand if I remember correctly, that also some of, not necessarily for the water fund, but for, since we're talking about utility funds in general, some of this was impacted by the required system improvements for like the inflow and infiltration that we had to do and the associated costs. So as I'm understanding it, as we, in the future, as we do begin to pay these debts off, John mentioned, being able to finally pay off the water filtration plant, that as these obligations are met, and then as our population grows, and perhaps businesses will have more people, more folks who are paying these rates, that could then contribute, that there is perhaps an end in sight to continually rising costs, that things could level off or go down. Although we might want to, as you said, consider an annual 1 or 2% cost increase to keep ahead of the curve.
Patrick, a point. Milwaukee does not have a sewer system. The product they turn out is called Milorganite, but they've turned that into a pseudo company, and the company owns the sewer lines from the street all the way through. It's basically pays for itself, and they turn money back into the city. And to get around state law, they had to give up the city's sewer system and turn it into a company that the city happens to own. But
okay. I was only in 6th grade, and that was more than 50 years ago. So I don't know the details, but thanks.
We used to buy Milorganite in Ohio. It's a fairly well-known product in the Midwest. So we got to think about selling our sewer.
All right. Any other questions?
Bill Eagle has a comment.
Yeah, sorry, Bill.
I just wanted to thank Matt for putting that chart up, because it shows that our rates, although we may think they're high, they're really not that exorbitant. They're not that different than other communities. In fact, we're down toward the bottom. So, it's one of the things that we're paying for the cost of civilization. When we're investing in our sewer system, when we're investing in our water system, we're actually investing in our community. And it's not money. It's not money that's being pumped out to the river. It's money that's actually valuable, that's going to a very valuable resource. And I just wanted to thank you, Matt, for being able to post.
Yeah, not a problem. And that graph is actually available on our website. If you go to departments and under utilities, there's a PDF of that graph. So anytime you want to grab it, and you're right, we are near the bottom. We're actually $3 away from being the second from the lowest, I think it was. So great point. Thank you, Bill. All right. So that was the water fund. We'll jump over to the sewer fund. So similar to the water fund, still pretty healthy in this realm. You'll notice, as you saw in the other enterprise funds, personnel services is lower, was a little bit over 1 million last year, 1.2 million in the previous years, and we're at $914,000. Thanks to Mohammed and his work and some of the efficiency improvements. No big changes here. Similar to the water fund, you'll see no debt service payments. That is included in the transfer that goes to the debt service fund. The 90-day unappropriated fund balance, that's the 90-day reserve policy, and that's $750,000. And then the contingency amount of a little over $3 million just to have in place if anything is needed. Looks like the mayor wants to say something. No? Oh, okay. You look like you were going to ask a question. Okay.
I was yawning, Matt. You caught me yawning.
Yawning.
Yes.
I'm going to put some, pictures or graphics, or I'll work on presentations. Last time I did a presentation at one of my conferences, I did some like Hugh Grant presentation, and it was all funky and flying, and it was more entertaining. I didn't think that was appropriate for a budget committee meeting, though, depending on if you like or don't like Hugh Grant. In any case, any questions on the sewer fund? Okay, we'll move on to the storm fund. This is the last fund for the night. So the storm fund, as we've seen in previous years, is not so healthy. This became apparent when, well, I think it's always been known by the past public works directors and John. It was, before I came, used to be included in the sewer fund. When I came in, I kind of argued to kind of break it out a little bit to, you know, as an enterprise fund, it's supposed to be self-sustainable. It's supposed to pay for itself. That's the purpose and mechanism of an enterprise fund, is that it pays for itself. And as you can see, the storm fund in the future will not pay for itself. So we have continuously made adjustments over the course of a couple years, and continue to make those adjustments. As Mohammed and we mentioned earlier, we're going through a master plan process for our sewer and storm. I anticipate once that master plan comes through that there will be some kind of adjustments we do in the rates as far as what utility customers see. Likely it's a combination of just kind of switching the cups around. So we take, you know, a few dollars away from sewer and we put up a few dollars in storm. So we kind of even things out a little bit. That's one way we can kind of manipulate. Bill, go ahead.
I just had a question.
Yeah.
How do we determine how much we're assessed on? Is it by square footage? Is it by the amount of asphalt on your property, or how do you figure that out?
If it is a single family residence, it's based on an estimated dwelling unit. So a single family would be charged 1 EDU. If it is a business or industrial customer, it is typically based on the amount of impervious surface. So how much pavement is your parking lot, so to speak. There are some ways that larger businesses can get adjustments on. For example, Walmart, when they came in, they actually built an on-site facility for storm management to help not pay as much of an impervious surface charge. Walmart floods a lot, but that's just my personal opinion. In any case, there are ways that larger businesses can put on-site facilities. You can also not pave your parking lot, and that would eliminate the impervious surface charge. So there are some businesses that purposely have gravel parking lots, and there's a reason they have gravel parking lots. It's because they don't want to pay a storm fee.
Matt, I'm going to ask a question, and this obviously you're going to have to answer from a legal thing. A lot of these gravel parking lots are sitting on basalt, so the water still runs into the storm sewer in the street. But the law says if it's gravel, it's not an impervious surface. Is that?
I believe as far as our municipal code is concerned, yes, but I am not the expert and would not be able to give you any kind of legal opinion.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, you know, it's not based on a test of how much stormwater runs off your property then.
That is my understanding as you mentioned it.
Okay, thank you.
Matt?
So they make impervious concrete, and they also brick is another thing that's impervious that you can actually utilize to get away from your storm.
And I think John has some.
Yeah, I think Matt might be over his skis a little bit there on some of that. But yeah, more than like any kind of development's going to have a requirement for pavement. You know, your front yard apron and all residential is going to be, gravel's not allowed anymore, basically, and especially in commercial and things.
We do have some that are grandfathered in, though.
For sure.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Councilor Martin. Yes.
Yeah. When was the last time that was reviewed, those resolutions and those issues that we have for impervious surfaces? And do you know when that was discussed?
The-
recently with the council?
The
I don't
last,
think that since I've been on the council, that has ever been discussed to a point of what we would do with, or how we would standardize that.
we did some small municipal code amendments back in 2017 after we did a system development charge, and I brought in a consultant, Donovan Enterprises, that updated the SDC fees for the city, as
remember
well
that.
as we looked at, specifically, I had him look at the storm fund because I got a little concerned and goes, what the heck is going on here? And so he reviewed our municipal code in comparison to some other cities. And there were several accounts, if you may or may not recall, there were several accounts that were not being billed for a few different reasons in the municipal code. And so I want to say there are about I think it was almost 100 accounts that were not being billed.
So as you see that line, or if you see the blocks diminishing in 2014,
Yeah.
no, 2024, 25.
Yeah.
As you see those diminishing, do you foresee any potential of re-looking at those standards and doing anything with that? I mean,
Yes.
it seems to be a kind of an unfair scenario at this point, the way I see it. I obviously do, and it's affecting that fund adversely. I mean, you look at that and it's going in the hole. Anyone can see that.
Yeah, I know one of the major changes we made, and I hate to pick on Walmart again, but they were paying a flat kind of, $11, $12 a month because they had their current treatment place on their site. Part of the revision of that code was rewriting some of that. And so they obviously, because the storm fee, like I said earlier, is not for the storm right outside of your house, it's for the entire system around the city. So it's all the roads you drive on.
Correct.
And Walmart specifically has a lot of customers, just like Safeway has a lot of customers. They're driving on the roads. So it is imperative that those larger businesses pay their fair share. So some of the municipal code was changed and updated to account for those changes. And that is part of those adjustments that we've kind of done over the course of the last couple of years to help rectify and kind of push off the problem additional years. I want to emphasize that we will never actually get to this point of 24, 25. It is forecasted with the numbers that we have right now. However, it was also forecasted 2 or 3 years, 2 years ago that we were going to be at this point.
Right.
So we've kind of continually made these adjustments, and Mohammed has come in as well to kind of push these master plan projects forward so that we can really have an opportunity to review the rates as well as the structure for those rates to ensure that everybody is paying a fair share for the system as a whole.
And I think Councillor Topaz has a valid point in terms of some people pay hardly anything. And this is a citywide problem. And it does eventually, no matter where you live, utilize the stormwater system in a sense. It ends up in one of the pipelines that the Public Works has put in. So we got to really look at that, I think, as we go down the line.
Yeah, I have, you can ask Mohammed and John, I've been impatiently waiting for these master plans for quite some time. So I have every faith that once we get those master plans completed, then we can relook at the rates and the municipal code to make adjustments for the future.
Thank you for shedding light on that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime. Any other questions on the storm fund? Okay, well, that is the last fund for the evening. Just want to make sure and open it up to any kind of questions on anything else. The only fund that we have left to go through is the general fund, and then actually approving the property tax rate and approving the proposed budget before it goes to city council for adoption at the next meeting on the 27th. Are there any questions or anything that myself, John, or any staff members on hand can answer?
I had a question out of ignorance. When are we going to review the City of St. Helens Urban Renewal Agency budget?
So that will be on the 27th as well. So we
Okay.
have the city council, city budget committee meeting from 6 to 7. The city urban renewal agency budget committee meeting will be from 7 to 8 that night. So we will review it right after we get done with the city meeting from 6 to 7.
Well, anyway, I just want to thank you again, Matt, for a good presentation. I want to thank Stephen Topaz particularly for some really intelligent questions, and also Claire Katz, which I really appreciated everything that was these questions that people asked, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot by sitting through this session. So I want to thank all of you for that.
Thanks,
Bill,
Phil.
Bill,
And if
I just want to thank you for stepping up and being the chair.
Well, anyway, if there aren't any other questions, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I just
So
want a
moved.
clarifying question, please.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure that we are going to have an opportunity to talk a little bit further about parks. I know I'm preaching to the choir here right now, but
You
I have
are.
a lot of concerns and I just want to make sure I have an opportunity. This is my first chance with budget committee. So yes.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you guys.
Yep, when we talk about the general fund, we'll talk about specifically each department. And so you will have an opportunity to talk about anything you'd like.
Awesome. Sounds good.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Those that want to stay on?
No, but I have a planning commission meeting I need to get to.
Oh, yes.
So.
Thank you guys. Thank you,
Thank you.
Matt and John.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.